The blood came fast. Sloane Remington pressed her palm against the wound on her thigh, felt the hot pulse of arterial spray through her fingers. Shrapnel from the IED. 3 inches of jagged metal buried deep in muscle tissue. The tourniquet went on in 4 seconds flat. Muscle memory. Her hands knew what to do even as her vision blurred at the edges. 200 meters away, 3 Marines were dying. She could hear them over the radio. Staff Sergeant Beckett's voice tight with controlled panic. Master Chief Callum Hayes, steady as granite, reporting casualties. And underneath it all, the wet sound of a sucked chest wound, someone drowning in their own blood, while the desert sun beat down without mercy. Doc, Beckett's voice crackled through her earpiece. We need you. Now. Sloane's free hand found the transmit button. Her voice came out level. Clinical. The same voice she'd used in a dozen firefights across Syria when her hands had held different tools and her name had been something other than what appeared on her dog tags. Copy, Sergeant. Chief Hayes, you have a tension pneumothorax on your casualty. Patient's right side, your left as you're facing. See the chest wall moving wrong. Static. Then Hayes's deep voice, affirmative, Doc. Needle decompression, second intercostal space mid-clavicular line, standard protocol. Don't wait for medevac. He's got maybe 3 minutes before his heart stops. She could hear Hayes moving, hear the rustle of medical supplies, hear the controlled urgency of a professional doing emergency medicine under fire. 300 miles away in the operations center, Commander Thaddeus Brennan stood frozen at the communications console. He'd been listening to the medical channel, had heard the calm precision in the corpsman's voice, had heard something else too, something that reminded him of a voice from 25 years ago, a voice that had looked him in the eye during Hell Week and said 3 words that had haunted him ever since. You're not ready. Brennan keyed his microphone. Mitchell, what's your status? Remington, sir? She always corrected them, every single time. Tourniquet applied, self-aid complete. I'm ambulatory, moving to casualties now. But Brennan wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the personnel file on his screen. The file that was 80% black redaction marks. The file with a name that shouldn't exist in his unit. A name that pulled at memories he'd tried to bury for 2.5 decades. Remington, Garrett Remington, Reaper. The ghost who'd broken him once before. 48 hours earlier, the desert had been quiet. Sloane sat in the medical tent under the white glare of LED lights, inventorying supplies with the methodical precision of someone who knew that counting wrong could cost lives. Hemostatic gauze, chest seals, combat application tourniquets rated for 250 pounds of pressure. The tools of her visible trade. Around her, the forward operating base hummed with the mechanical rhythm of military life. Generators, radio chatter. The distant thump of rotor blades as a helicopter lifted off from the landing zone. She was small. 5'4", 118 pounds. In her desert fatigues, she looked like someone's younger sister who'd wandered into the wrong recruitment office. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that wasn't strictly necessary. Her hands moved with quiet efficiency as she counted morphine auto-injectors. Counted once, counted twice. She always counted twice. The tent flap opened. Commander Brennan stepped inside, followed by the considerable bulk of Master Chief Hayes. Brennan was 52 years old with the weathered face of a man who'd spent 3 decades under the sun. His eyes were sharp and tired in equal measure. Hayes was 48, with shoulders like a linebacker and a voice like distant thunder. Between them, they had 43 years of military service. Remington. Brennan's eyes swept over her, taking in her, saying in her youth, the quiet competence in the way she worked. Welcome to Marine Recon Platoon. Sloane stood, came to attention with the automatic precision of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Sir? At ease. Chief Hayes will integrate you into the team. You come with high marks from your last posting. High marks. That's what they called 3 years of classified operations when they couldn't say what you'd really done. When the Syrian dust was still in your lungs and the call sign you'd used was burned in a CIA basement somewhere outside Langley. When the things you'd seen and done existed only in redacted files and the nightmares you didn't talk about. Thank you, sir. Brennan's eyes lingered on her face for a moment, searching for something, some ghost of recognition that he couldn't quite place. Then he nodded once and turned to leave. Hayes remained, his gray eyes thoughtful. Doc. The chief's voice was neutral, professional, the tone of a senior enlisted man sizing up a new member of his team. You ever work with recon before? No, Chief. It's different than regular Marine units. We move fast, we shoot straight, we don't stop for much of anything. You need to keep up. Can you do that? I will, Chief. Hayes studied her for a long moment. She could see the calculation in his eyes. The same calculation she'd seen 100 times in 100 different units. Too small, too young, too female. The mathematics of doubt that women in combat had to solve with actions instead of words. But Hayes just nodded. Gear up. Mission brief at 1600. Don't be late. I won't, Chief. The briefing room was all concrete and metal folding chairs. 12 Marines sat in casual poses that didn't match the alertness in their eyes. They had the lean, hard look of men who lived on the edge of violence and had learned to be comfortable there. Sloan took a seat in the back. Didn't make eye contact. That was the key to being invisible. Don't challenge, don't shrink, just exist in the middle space where people forget to look too closely. Staff Sergeant Marcus Beckett saw her anyway. We got ourselves a new corpsman, his voice carried across the room. Not hostile exactly, just loud, just marking territory. Looks like somebody's little sister wandered in from the PX. A few laughs rippled through the room, not cruel ones. Just the reflexive humor of men who lived with death every day and needed to make light of everything else to stay sane. Sloan didn't react, kept her eyes forward, kept her face neutral. She'd learned a long time ago that the fastest way to earn respect was to not need it, to just do the job and let the results speak. Brennan entered and the room snapped to attention with the synchronized precision of a well-oiled machine. Seats, he moved to the map on the wall. Syria-Iraq border region. Red zones marked in grease pencil. Areas of enemy activity highlighted in yellow. Their own position marked with a blue star. Intel indicates increased ISIS activity in Sector 7. We're running reconnaissance patrols, gathering information, staying sharp. Our mission is to maintain presence and be ready to respond if something develops. Corpsman Remington is our new medical asset. He paused, glanced at a file folder. She comes from a previous posting that's classified, which means we don't ask questions about where she's been or what she's done. Clear? Yes, sir. Brennan's eyes found Sloan in the back of the room. Doc, you qualified on the M4? Every corpsman was. Basic combat training, standard issue, but she could feel the weight of the question. The real question underneath about whether she could actually use it if things went bad. Yes, sir. Good, you'll carry one as secondary, but your primary job is keeping these Marines alive. Medical first, everything else second. Understood. Understood, sir. After the briefing, the Marines filtered out in ones and twos, talking quietly among themselves, making plans. Sloan remained in her seat, organizing her notes with the same precision she applied to everything else. She felt someone approach from her left, looked up. Beckett stood there with his arms crossed over his chest. Remington right. Yes, Sergeant. You ever actually see combat doc real combat not training exercises? The question was fair, reasonable even. She gave him the answer that was true enough without being the whole truth. Some, Sergeant. Some, Beckett nodded slowly, like he was chewing on the word, testing its weight. Well, out here it's not some, it's constant. Low level, but always there. You freeze up, people die. You understand that? I do, Sergeant. Good. He turned to leave, then stopped. Looked back over his shoulder. Also, real talk. Can you actually carry a 50-pound rug 12 miles in this heat? Because I've seen corpsmen before who look like you. They don't usually make it past the first patrol. Sloan met his eyes. Didn't blink. Didn't look away. I'll make it, Sergeant. Something shifted in Beckett's expression. Not respect. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of a possibility that she might surprise him. We'll see, Doc. We'll see. The next morning dawned hot and bright. Sloan found herself walking past the weapons range on her way to the medical supply depot. She hadn't planned to stop, hadn't planned to watch, but her feet slowed of their own accord when she heard the distinctive crack of rifle fire. Through the chain-link fence, she watched the Marines run shooting drills. Beckett was coaching a young lance corporal named Riker, 23 years old, fresh-faced in a way that wouldn't last long out here. Baby-faced and eager, and still convinced he was immortal. Breathe, Riker. You're jerking the trigger like you're trying to yank it off. Another shot. Wide right by at least 6 inches at 100 meters. Squeeze, don't pull. Gentle. Like you're trying not to wake it up. Like it's a sleeping baby and you don't want to startle it. Sloane's fingers twitched at her side. She caught the movement, forced her hand still, shoved it into her pocket. But something in her chest had tightened. She could see that Riker's stance was fundamentally wrong. Weight too far forward. Elbow canted up instead of tucked. Breathing all wrong, the same mistakes she'd made at 14 before her father had corrected them with patient hands and a voice that never needed to raise itself to make a point stick. Aim small, miss small, sweetheart. If you aim at a man, you might miss the man. But if you aim at a button on his shirt, you might miss the button, but you'll hit the man. She turned away before anyone noticed her watching, before anyone saw the knowledge in her eyes, before anyone asked questions she couldn't answer without opening doors that needed to stay closed. Chief Hayes noticed anyway. He found her an hour later in the medical tent, knocked on the tent pole even though the flap was open and he could have just walked in. "Doctor, got a minute?" "Of course, Chief." Hayes stepped inside. He moved like a man who'd spent his whole life being too big for rooms. Careful, economical, aware of his own mass and the space it occupied. "Saw you at the range this morning. Just passing through, Chief." "Uh-huh." Hayes's eyes were gray and quiet and saw more than most people wanted them to see. "You shoot, Doc." The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications. Sloan kept her hands busy organizing supplies, didn't look up, didn't meet his eyes. "Qualified on the M9 and M4, Chief. Standard issue, like everyone else." "That's not what I asked." Her hands paused for just a second, a tiny hesitation that Hayes caught and filed away. "I know how to shoot, Chief." "Who taught you?" Now she did look up. Hayes was watching her with something that wasn't quite suspicion, more like recognition, like he'd seen something in her that reminded him of someone else, someone from his past. "My father, Chief." Hayes nodded slowly. Didn't ask for more details. Didn't push. But his eyes lingered on her hands, on the calluses on her fingertips that didn't come from medical work alone, on the unconscious way her fingers had twitched when she'd watched Riker shoot. "Good to know, Doc. Good to know." The days blurred together after that. Desert heat and routine, morning sick call, afternoon training, evening inventory. The rhythm of military life that was the same everywhere from Afghanistan to Germany to right here on the Syrian border. Sloan fell into it easily, too easily, like slipping into an old coat that still fit perfectly despite years in storage. The Marines watched her, tested her, not with malice, just with the natural skepticism of men who'd seen people fail before and didn't want to invest emotional energy in someone who might not last. On the third day, they ran a conditioning ruck march. 12 miles in full gear, 50 pounds of equipment in 100-degree heat, the kind of exercise designed to identify weaknesses and break the people who didn't belong. Beckett led the formation, setting a pace that was just shy of punishing. The Marines fell in behind him. Sloan took her place in the middle of the pack. Didn't try to lead, didn't fall to the back, just maintained position with quiet competence. 2 miles in, the first Marine started to struggle. 4 miles in, another fell out with heat cramps. By mile 8, 2 more had dropped. But Sloan kept moving, one foot in front of the other, breathing steady, heart rate controlled. The 50 pounds might as well have been nothing. When they crossed the finish line, she wasn't even breathing hard. Beckett looked at her with new eyes, reassessing, recalculating. "All right, Doc, maybe you can hang after all." That afternoon, she ran combat casualty care training for the platoon. Stood in front of 12 Marines who'd seen more action than most emergency rooms and taught them things they thought they already knew. Tourniquet application. She held up a cat tourniquet, demonstrated on her own arm. High and tight, not where the wound is, where the artery is. You've got 90 seconds before brain damage from blood loss starts. Less if it's the femoral. Every second counts. The Marines leaned forward, paying attention now. She'd earned that much. Needle decompression for tension pneumothorax. You're looking for the second intercostal space. She touched her own chest, indicated the exact spot. Between ribs 2 and 3 midclavicular line. If you see asymmetric chest wall movement, if breath sounds are absent on one side, if the patient's deteriorating despite your interventions, you don't wait. You decompress. You put that needle in and you pray you got it right. Beckett raised his hand. "How do you know it worked?" "Rush of air when you insert. Immediate improvement in respiratory effort. Patient starts looking less like they're dying. If you don't get those signs, you missed. Try again, different location. You don't stop until they're stable or they're dead. Those are your only 2 options." The room was completely silent. Sloan looked at their faces, saw belief starting to form, not in her as a person, in her knowledge, in her competence. It was a start. It was enough for now. After the training session, young Lance Corporal Riker approached with questions about IV placement in field conditions. How do you find a vein in a dehydrated patient? What angle do you use? What if their blood pressure is tanking? Sloan answered patiently. Showed him the tricks she'd learned, the angles, the way to feel for a vein even when you couldn't see it. the technique that had saved lives in places that didn't exist on official maps. Doc Riker said, finally, his young face serious. Where'd you learn all this? I mean, really learn it. This isn't textbook stuff. This is like, you've done it for real, multiple times. Sloane closed her medical bag, zipped it shut with deliberate care. School, Riker, same as everyone else. Nah, he shook his head. His instincts were good, even if his shooting wasn't. This is different. This is combat medicine. Real combat medicine. You've been there, haven't you? Sloane looked at him, this kid who still thought war was noble, who hadn't yet learned that it was just case and blood and trying not to die while keeping other people from dying too. She didn't answer his question, just picked up her bag and walked away. But he was right. She had been there, in places whose names were classified, for missions that didn't officially exist. She'd knelt in Syrian dirt with mortars falling and held pressure on wounds that should have been fatal. She'd called for extraction in 3 languages while bullets sparked off stone around her head. She'd watched men die despite her best efforts and learned to live with the weight of that failure. She'd also done other things, things that had nothing to do with medicine, things that involved different tools and different mathematics. Wind speed and bullet drop and the exact pressure needed to squeeze a trigger without disturbing your sight picture. But that was before the promise she'd made, before she'd looked her mother in the eye at her father's grave and sworn she'd never touch a rifle again. On the 5th day, the heat got to Riker. They were running combat movement drills in full gear. Noon. The sun was a physical weight pressing down on everything. Temperature had to be pushing 110 in the shade, and there wasn't any shade to be found. Sloane was with the command element watching from the minimal cover of a camouflage net. She saw Riker stumble, saw him catch himself with visible effort, keep moving because Marines didn't quit. His face was red, too red, flushed in a way that set off alarm bells in her medic brain. She stood up, grabbed her medical bag, started walking toward the exercise area without thinking about it. Beckett noticed. Doc, we're in the middle of, Sergeant, pull Riker out of the drill, right now. He's fine, he just needs to push through. He has heat exhaustion progressing toward heat stroke. Core temperature probably over 103. Another 10 minutes and he'll be seizing. Pull him out now or I will. Beckett's jaw tightened. He didn't like being contradicted, especially not in front of the platoon. But he'd also seen enough to know that corpsmen didn't make medical calls lightly. He called the halt. Sloane reached Riker just as his knees buckled. She caught him, lowered him to the ground with surprising strength for someone her size. His skin was hot and dry to the touch, pupils unequal, heart rate 105 and climbing. Get him in the shade. I need water. Ice if we have it. Someone call for a vehicle. The Marines moved immediately, no hesitation. She'd proven herself enough that they listened without question. Sloane worked with the focused calm of someone who'd done this before. IV line in with practiced efficiency. 18 gauge in the antecubital vein. Normal saline wide open. Cooling measures, ice packs to the groin and armpits. Monitoring vitals every 2 minutes. Riker's eyes rolled back. Started to seize. On his side, protect his airway. Nobody put anything in his mouth. She'd seen heat stroke before. Knew the progression. Knew that the next 10 minutes would determine whether this kid walked away or spent the rest of his life with brain damage. Brennan arrived, stood watching as Sloane managed the emergency with the kind of calm competence that only came from real experience. Not training, not drills, the real thing. When Riker's vitals finally stabilized when the seizure stopped and his pupils started to react normally again, Brennan nodded once. Good catch, Doc. Just doing my job, sir. But it was more than that. They all knew it. She'd seen something no one else had noticed, had acted without hesitation, had known exactly what to do and how to do it, had quite possibly saved Riker's life. That night in the chow hall, the atmosphere around Sloane changed. Not dramatically, not obviously, just a subtle shift in how the Marines looked at her, how they made space for her at the table, how they included her in conversations. When she sat down with her tray, Riker was there, looking sheepish and grateful in equal measure. Thanks, Doc. Corpsman at the aid station said I was close to seizing out completely. Said you probably saved my life. You're welcome. Drink more water tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until we leave this place. Will do. He paused, looked at her with young eyes that were starting to see more than they had before. Hey, Doc, you seem like you really know your stuff, like really know it. Not just textbook knowledge. Were you deployed somewhere before this? Sloane cut her food, didn't look up. Didn't want him to see what might be in her eyes. I've been around Riker. Hayes was listening from the next table over. Those quiet gray eyes watching, calculating, starting to piece together a picture from the small details she couldn't quite hide. The mission briefing came on day 7. Brennan stood at the front of the room, his face harder than usual, more lines around his eyes. The weight of command sitting heavier on his shoulders. Gentlemen, we have intelligence on 2 American contractors taken hostage 40 clicks north of our position. James Sullivan and Robert Chen, both civilian infrastructure specialists. ISIS cell grabbed them 3 days ago. Intel says maybe 15 to 20 fighters. They're expecting ransom negotiations, so they're not moving the hostages yet. But that won't last. He clicked to a satellite image. A walled compound in the middle of nowhere. Classic Middle Eastern architecture. High walls, multiple structures. Perfect place to hold someone you didn't want found. We're tasked with reconnaissance and possible extraction if the opportunity presents itself. Command wants eyes on the situation. Real-time assessment. If we can get them out safely, we do it. If not, we gather information for a larger operation. The Marines leaned forward. This was real. This was why they were here. We roll at 2,200 hours tonight. 2 vehicles. Alpha team hits the compound for close reconnaissance. Bravo maintains outer perimeter security. Charlie element is rear security and medical support. Brennan's eyes found Sloan. Remington, you're with Charlie, Beckett, Riker, and 2 others. Your job is to stay back and be ready if we need you. Crystal clear. Clear, sir. After the briefing, Sloan returned to her tent, sat on her cot, pulled her personal bag from under the frame and extracted a photograph she kept wrapped in plastic. 3 people in front of a Montana landscape. Mountains in the background. Big sky above. A man, a woman, and a girl of 16. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of presence that filled a room even in a photograph. Garrett Remington, Reaper. The SEAL who'd made her who she was. The woman was elegant, dark-haired, smiling but with worry in her eyes. The worry that never quite left when you loved a warrior. The girl held a rifle. Remington 700, custom stock. The same rifle her father had carried. The rifle she'd learned on. The rifle that now sat in an armory somewhere waiting. Sloan traced her father's face with one finger. Remembered his voice. Remembered the lessons. Remembered everything he'd taught her about precision and patience and the mathematics of impossible shots. She put the photograph away. Began checking her medical gear with obsessive thoroughness. Every supply, every medication, every piece of equipment that might mean the difference between life and death. At 2,200 hours, 2 Humvees rolled out of the base. Sloan sat in the second vehicle, medical bag at her feet, M4 rifle across her lap. She'd never fired it. Not in combat, not since she'd made the promise to her mother. But she kept it clean and maintained because that's what professionals did. Beckett drove. Riker rode shotgun. 2 other Marines in back with Sloan. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the engine and the rattle of equipment in the night wind coming through the open windows. 40 kilometers, 90 minutes of rough terrain, driving without lights using night vision. The desert was a study in blacks and grays through the green glow of NVGs. They stopped 2 kilometers from the target, dismounted in silence. The teams organized with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. Alpha Team Brennan Hayes and 6 Marines moved forward into the darkness, weapons ready, advancing on the compound where 2 Americans waited for rescue or death. Bravo Team took up perimeter positions. Overwatch, security, the outer ring. Charlie Element stayed with the vehicles, waiting. Sloan checked her medical supplies one more time, made sure everything was ready, made sure she could find anything she needed in the dark. Beckett checked his watch. 30 minutes to objective, then we wait. The radio crackled softly, Hayes' voice whisper quiet. Alpha at phase line, proceeding to target. More waiting. Sloan counted her heartbeats. 60 per minute, resting rate. Years of training had made it automatic. No matter what was happening around her, her body stayed calm, ready. 10 minutes later, Alpha at compound, beginning reconnaissance. Sloan could picture it, the team moving through darkness, approaching the walls, using mirrors to look over, counting hostiles, locating the hostages, building a picture. 5 minutes of silence. Then the world exploded. The flash lit up the northern horizon like lightning. The sound came a second later, a deep, tearing boom that rattled in the chest. IED, big one. IED, IED, Alpha taking fire. The radio erupted with voices, shouting. Automatic weapons fire in the background. The distinct crack of AK-47s, the deeper boom of American rifles returning fire. Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. Bravo suppressed the north wall. Alpha fall back to rally point. Then Hayes, his calm voice tight with urgency. Two down, sucking chest wound on one. Possible femoral bleed on the other. We need Doc. We need her now. Beckett grabbed the radio, started to respond, started to say they couldn't, that it was too hot, that Commander had said to stay back. But Sloan was already moving, had grabbed her medical bag, was running toward the sound of gunfire before anyone could stop her. Doc, Beckett shouted after her. Commander said she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Two Marines were bleeding out 200 meters away. Nothing else mattered. Not orders, not safety, not the promise she'd made to stay out of combat. Only the mission, only the lives that needed saving. She ran through the darkness with 70 pounds of gear and the certainty that this was what she'd been trained for. This was why her father had taught her. This was why she existed. To save lives when seconds mattered and hesitation meant death. The 200 meters felt like 2 miles. Full sprint through soft sand, medical bag pounding against her back, 70 pounds that tried to drag her down with every step. She could hear the firefight ahead getting louder. Machine gun fire, the sharp crack of rifles, the deeper thump of grenades. She reached Alpha's position behind a low stone wall, found them pinned down, muzzle flashes in the darkness, incoming fire sparking off stone and kicking up sand. And on the ground behind the wall, 2 Marines down. Sloan dropped beside the first one. Combat mindset kicked in. Triage training, assess the worst injury first, save the most savable. Chest wound, blood bubbling from a hole between his ribs. Every breath pushed more blood out. Tension pneumothorax. The lung was collapsed and air was building up in the chest cavity with nowhere to go. If she didn't fix it in the next 2 minutes, his heart would stop from the pressure. She pulled out her needle decompression kit, 14-gauge catheter, found the anatomical landmark on his chest even in the dark. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, the same spot she'd taught the platoon 3 days ago. Pushed the needle in at a 90-degree angle, felt it pop through the chest wall, felt the rush of air that meant she'd done it right. The Marine's breathing eased immediately. Color started coming back to his face. Chief. She handed Hayes a chest seal without looking away from her patient. Apply this. Keep pressure. Don't let air get back in. Hayes took it. His hands were steady despite the bullets flying overhead. Got it, Doc. Second Marine, leg wound. Tourniquet already applied by someone, but blood was still pumping out. Dark arterial blood, femoral artery. The kind of wound that killed you in 90 seconds if it wasn't controlled. Sloan ripped open her medical pack, grabbed hemostatic gauze, the expensive stuff, the combat gauze that cost $40 per package and was worth every penny when someone was bleeding to death. She packed the wound, shoved the gauze deep into the hole in his leg where the artery was torn, held pressure with both hands, counted to 3 minutes. The longest 3 minutes of her life while bullets cracked overhead and the firefight raged around her. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Stable. She grabbed her radio, keyed the mic. 2 casualties stabilized. 1 pneumothorax decompressed, 1 femoral hemorrhage controlled. Need medevac ASAP, but both should make it. Brennan's voice came back tight with stress, but relieved. Copy, Doc. Good work. Medevac is 20 minutes out. Can they hold that long? Sloan checked both Marines. Vitals, breathing, color. They were stable. Not good, but stable. Affirmative, sir. They'll make it. That's when she saw him, 400 meters out, on top of a low building that overlooked their position. A silhouette against the stars. A man with a rifle. Not just any rifle. Long rifle. Sniper configuration. The distinctive profile of someone who knew what they were doing. And he was aiming directly at Commander Brennan's position. Sloan's mind went into a different mode. Not medical. Not the corpsman who saved lives. Something older. Something her father had trained into her from age 10 to 18 on a Montana rifle range. Wind speed. Distance. Trajectory. The mathematics of death delivered at long range. The calculations came automatically. Unbidden. A skill set she'd sworn never to use again. 400 meters, 8-mile-per-hour wind from the east. Target stationary for now, but could move at any second, shooting uphill by maybe 15 degrees. Her eyes found the Barrett M82 lying next to one of the wounded Marines, the big .50 caliber sniper rifle, 30 pounds of precision engineering designed to reach out and touch someone at distances that seemed impossible. Her hands knew what to do, had known since she was 16 years old, and made her first 1,000-meter shot with her father watching. Proud, beaming, his daughter the prodigy. But her promise screamed in her mind, the words she'd said at her father's funeral, the oath she'd sworn to her grieving mother. Never again. No more rifles, no more killing, just medicine, just saving lives. The sniper's rifle swung fractionally, adjusting his aim, his finger on the trigger. 3 seconds from firing, 3 seconds from killing Commander Brennan. Brennan who'd given her a chance, who'd trusted her, who didn't know he was 3 seconds from having his head exploded by a bullet he'd never hear coming. Time slowed to a crawl. Sloane's hand closed around the Barrett's grip. The metal was still warm from the wounded Marine who'd been carrying it. 30 pounds that felt like nothing in her hands, like coming home. She lifted the weapon. Her body remembered. 8 years since she'd fired a rifle in anger. 8 years since she'd broken the promise the first time. But muscle memory didn't fade. Didn't forget. Prone position. Bipod deployed. Cheek to stock. Eye to scope. The world narrowed to the small circle of green night vision. The target crystal clear. 400 meters. She could make this shot. Could have made it at 16. Could make it now, even with 8 years of rust. Commander down. Brennan dropped flat. The sniper's shot cracked through the air where Brennan's head had been a second before. Hit the wall. Sparked. Ricocheted into darkness. Sloane breathed in. 4-count inhale. Like her father taught her. Like she'd done 1,000 times. Held. 7-count hold. Calculated. Wind. Distance. Uphill angle. The bullet would rise slightly. Had to aim low. 6 inches low. Maybe 8. Her finger found the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure. Halfway to the 4-pound break point. Squeezed. The Barrett roared. Kicked like a mule. 30 pounds of rifle trying to break her collarbone. The muzzle flash lit up the night. Gave away her position to anyone watching. The bullet flew. 400 meters in .6 seconds. Missed. High and right by 12 inches. Sparked off the building behind the sniper. Close enough to make him flinch, but not close enough to matter. Sloane's heart hammered. 8 years. She'd lost the edge. The precision her father had drilled into her was still there, but rusty. Corroded by time and disuse and the conscious choice to walk away. The sniper swung toward her. She could see him through the scope, see his weapon tracking, see him finding her muzzle flash, see his crosshairs settling on her position. No time to think, no time to remember the promise or the funeral or her mother's tears. Only time to do what her father had taught her all those years ago in Montana. Breathe out. 8-count exhale. Slow. Controlled. Let the heartbeat slow. Find the space between the beats where the rifle was perfectly still. Aim small, miss small, sweetheart. If you aim at a man, you might miss the man. But if you aim at a button on his shirt, you might miss the button, but you'll hit the man. Her finger touched the trigger like glass. Like something precious and fragile, like waking something gently from sleep. Squeeze, don't pull, don't jerk. Just increase pressure until the rifle decides to fire on its own. The Barrett spoke again. 400 meters, .6 seconds of flight time. This time the bullet flew true. Center mass, exactly where she'd aimed. The sniper fell, dropped his rifle, tumbled from the rooftop. For 3 full heartbeats, nothing moved. The entire firefight seemed to freeze. Every Marine staring at her, at the rifle, at the building 400 meters away where a body was falling, at the impossibility of what they just witnessed. Sloane lowered the Barrett, set it down carefully next to the wounded Marine. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline. And something else, the weight of a broken promise. The knowledge that she'd just crossed a line she'd sworn never to cross again. She looked up, met Brennan's eyes across 10 meters of darkness. The commander's face was completely white, his mouth hanging open. But no words came out. He just stared at her like she'd materialized from his nightmares. Finally, Beckett's voice broke the silence. Barely a whisper, shocked. What the actual hell? Sloane stood, picked up her medical bag. Her voice came out steady, professional, the same calm tone she'd used 1,000 times in 1,000 emergencies. Casualties are stable, sir. Request permission to move them to the vehicles for medevac extraction. But nobody was listening. They were all staring at her, at the rifle, at the rooftop 400 meters away, at the proof that their quiet small corpsman was something else entirely. Something they hadn't seen coming. Something that didn't fit into the neat boxes of their understanding. Hayes found his voice first. Doc. His voice was rough, uncertain. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Sloan met his gray eyes, saw the question there, saw the recognition dawning, saw him starting to put pieces together. She could lie, could deflect, could walk away from this moment and never acknowledge what it meant. But she was tired, tired of hiding, tired of being less than what she was. And somewhere in Arlington National Cemetery, her father deserved better than a daughter who was ashamed of what he'd taught her. My father taught me, Chief. Your father. Hayes's voice was quiet, controlled, but she could hear the weight behind it. Who exactly was your father, Doc? She could still lie, could still walk away, but the truth was coming whether she wanted it or not. Better to control the reveal than let it control her. Garrett Remington, she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. SEAL Team 3, call sign Reaper. The silence that followed was absolute, complete, the kind of silence that comes when the world shifts under your feet and nothing makes sense anymore. Then Brennan stepped forward. His face had gone from white to gray. His hands were trembling. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Reaper, Ghost Remington. The Reaper was your father. Yes, sir. The Reaper who... Brennan couldn't finish the sentence. His eyes were somewhere else. 25 years into the past. Bud/S training, Hell Week. A voice that had looked at him and seen through him and found him wanting. The voice that had haunted him for 2.5 decades. Now coming from the mouth of a 28-year-old corpsman who just made an impossible shot in combat. Your Ghost's daughter, Brennan said. Statement, not question. Yes, sir. And you just... He gestured helplessly at the Barrett, at the building. At the 400-meter shot in darkness that shouldn't have been possible. You just... saved your life, sir. The words hung in the desert air, true and undeniable and changing everything. The medevac helicopter came 20 minutes later, Black Hawk rotors beating the desert air into submission. The 2 wounded Marines were loaded carefully, Sloan supervising every movement, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, doing the job she was trained for while 12 other Marines watched her with new eyes. She rode with the casualties, sat between them in the helicopter bay, monitored their breathing, their heart rates, their color. Doing medicine because medicine was something she understood, something that made sense in a world that had suddenly become very complicated. When they landed at the field hospital, she helped transfer the patients to the emergency team, gave her report with clinical precision, stayed until both Marines were stable and cleared for surgery. Then she walked out into the pre-dawn darkness and finally let herself feel it. The weight of what she'd done, the promise she'd broken, the line she'd crossed. She'd killed a man tonight. Hadn't been her first, wouldn't be her last. But it was the first since she'd sworn to her mother that she was done with that life, done with rifles and killing and being her father's daughter in all the ways that mattered. Hayes found her sitting on a concrete barrier outside the hospital tent, staring at nothing, processing. Doc. He sat down beside her, didn't say anything else, just sat there in companionable silence while the eastern sky started to lighten. Finally, Sloan spoke. I promised her I wouldn't do this anymore. Your mother. Yeah, at Dad's funeral. She was destroyed, completely broken, and she begged me to stop, to be safe, to not follow him into the ground. Sloan's voice was flat, empty. I promised. I meant it. I really did. But tonight you had to choose. Yeah. Between the promise and Commander Brennan's life. Yeah. Hayes nodded slowly, looked at the lightening sky. That's the choice warriors face, Doc. Between the comfort of peace and the necessity of violence, between who we want to be and who we need to be in the moment. I know, doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. Hayes paused. But you made the right choice. Brennan's alive because of you. Those 2 wounded Marines are alive because of you. That's what matters. Sloan wanted to believe that, wanted to feel the rightness of it, but all she felt was the weight of her mother's voice, the tears, the pleading, the grief that had aged her 10 years in a single day. I need to call her, she said quietly. Need to tell her before she hears it some other way. Yeah, you do. Hayes stood up. Get some rest first. Call her when you're ready. And Doc, for what it's worth, your father would be proud. I never met him, but I know the type. Men like that, they teach their kids to be ready, to be capable, to make the hard choice when it comes. You honored that teaching tonight. He left her there, alone with the sunrise and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. Back at the base 6 hours later, Sloan sat in her tent with her satellite phone. Her mother would be awake now. Montana was 14 hours behind. Early evening there. Her mother would be making dinner. moving through the routines that had helped her survive 5 years of widowhood. The call connected after 4 rings. Sloan, her mother's voice, warm, worried, always worried. Honey, is everything okay? Hi, Mom. Yeah, I'm fine. Just wanted to check in. You sound tired. Are they working you too hard? No more than usual. Sloan closed her eyes, tried to find the words. Mom, I need to tell you something. The pause on the other end said everything. Her mother knew that tone, knew what it meant. What happened? I had to use a rifle last night in combat to save someone's life. The silence was absolute. Then very quietly, almost a whisper, oh, Sloan, I'm sorry, I know I promised. But there was a Marine Commander Brennan, and there was a shooter, and if I hadn't... Stop, her mother's voice was tight, controlled in the way that meant she was fighting tears. Just stop. I don't want to hear the justification. Don't want to hear about duty or necessity or how someone would have died. I know all that. Your father used those same words 100 times. Mom, your father did the same thing, Sloan, every single time. It was necessary. It was important. It was life or death, and it was. God help me, I know it was, but it took him from me anyway. Her voice broke. And I can't lose you too. I can't go through that again. You won't lose me. You don't know that. Your father didn't know it either. And now you're walking the same path, breaking the same promise, making the same choices, and I'm supposed to just accept it. Sloan had no answer, because her mother was right. There were no guarantees. Not in this life, not in this work. Her father had been the best, and he'd still ended up in a flag-draped coffin. I'm sorry, she said again. The words felt hollow, inadequate. I'm so sorry, Mom. Her mother was crying now, quiet sobs that tore at Sloan worse than any wound. I love you. God help me. I love you so much. And if this is who you are, if this is what you need to do, then I'll try to accept it. But it terrifies me. Every single day it terrifies me. I know, Mom, I know. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come home. It was a promise Sloan couldn't honestly make. Not in this work, not with the choices she was facing, but sometimes love required gentle lies. I promise, Mom, I'll come home. They talked for a few more minutes about weather, about neighbors, about the ranch and the small, normal things that anchored both of them to a world that made sense. Then they said goodbye, and Sloan was alone again, with the weight of broken promises and the knowledge that more would break before this was over. Commander Brennan summoned her at 1400 hours. His office was a converted shipping container with a desk, 2 chairs, and a fan that didn't do much against the heat. Hayes and Beckett were already there when she arrived. Both stood when she entered. Respect, recognition, the beginning of something that might become acceptance. Sit, Remington, Brennan gestured to the empty chair. She sat. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Brennan just looked at her. Really looked, seeing past the small frame and the quiet manner to whatever lay beneath. That shot last night, he finally said. 400 meters, in darkness. First shot missed, second shot was perfect. Center mass, immediate incapacitation. Yes, sir. Corpsmen don't shoot like that, Remington. No, sir, they don't. So I need you to explain something to me, because right now nothing about you makes sense. Brennan leaned forward. Your file is 80% redacted. You show up as a corpsman, but you shoot like a Tier 1 operator. And your last name, he paused, swallowed. Garrett Remington, the Reaper. He was your father. Yes, sir. Brennan's hands clenched on his desk. I knew him 25 years ago. I was 27, thought I was God's gift to warfare, signed up for SEAL training. BUD/S was going to be the next great operator. His voice went bitter. Your father was one of the instructors. Hell Week. Second day, I was hypothermic, exhausted, running on fumes, and he pulled me aside. Sloan waited. She'd heard this story, from the other side, from her father's perspective. He looked at me, Brennan continued, just looked right through me. Then he said, Brennan, you're tough, but you're not ready. You don't have what it takes. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And he pulled me from training. He didn't fail you, sir. He was trying to save your life. I know that now. Took me 15 years to understand it. But at the time, I hated him. Thought he'd stolen my dream out of spite or prejudice or whatever excuse I needed to make myself feel better. So I went back to regular Navy, worked my way up through the ranks, eventually made it to Recon Command. But I never forgot his face. Never forgot that moment of judgment. He looked at Sloan with something like wonder. And now his daughter is in my unit, saving my life with skills that shouldn't exist in a corpsman's toolkit. Different skills, sir. I'm a medic first. Are you? Brennan's eyes were sharp. Because last night you were a sniper, one of the best shots I've ever witnessed. And I've worked with dedicated snipers who couldn't make that shot under those conditions. Hayes spoke up. Sir, permission to be direct. Granted, Chief. Doc, we need to know what we're dealing with here. Not for official reports, just for our own understanding. Who are you really? Sloan looked at the three men. Brennan with his buried shame and grudging respect. Hayes with his quiet wisdom. Beckett with his skepticism melting into belief. They deserved the truth, or as much of it as she could give. My father started teaching me to shoot when I was 10 years old, she said. We had a ranch in Montana, 1,500 acres. He built a rifle range that went out to 1,200 meters. Every weekend from age 10 to 18, he trained me. Not taught, trained. Trained you in what? Hayes asked. Everything. Ballistics, wind reading, range estimation, minute of angle calculations, breathing techniques, trigger control, how to read mirage, how to estimate distance using mil dots, how to calculate bullet drop for different calibers at different ranges. She paused. He made it a game at first, made it fun. Then it became serious. Why? Brennan's voice was quiet, almost afraid of the answer. Why would a SEAL train his 10-year-old daughter like that? Because he said precision saved lives, whether you were a doctor or a soldier or something in between. He said precision mattered more than anything, and he wanted me to have options. To be able to protect myself and others if protection was ever needed. Sloane's hands rested on her knees, steady, calm, betraying nothing of the emotions underneath. When I was 16, he took me hunting. Elk season up in the high country. We tracked one for 3 days through snow and cold. Finally got a shot opportunity. 840 meters, 20-mile-per-hour crosswind, uphill angle of 30 degrees. Elk was moving. She looked at Beckett. He let me take the shot. Did you make it? Beckett's voice was soft, respectful. Clean kill, one shot, dropped in its tracks. No pride in her voice, just fact. Dad said that was the day I graduated. Said I could hit anything I could see clearly enough to aim at. Hayes nodded slowly. And then you joined the Navy. Not right away. Went to college first. Pre-med. Wanted to be a trauma surgeon. Save lives in hospitals. Keep my hands clean. She smiled without humor. But after 2 years, I got recruited. Did some work overseas. Eventually ended up as a corpsman because it was the closest thing to what I really wanted to be. What work overseas? Brennan pressed. But his tone said he already knew. Sloan met his eyes. The kind that doesn't exist on paper, sir. The kind that gets redacted from files. CIA Special Activities Division. She didn't confirm or deny, just held his gaze. How long? 3 years, Syria mostly. Some Iraq, some other places whose names I can't say. She paused. Came back stateside 8 months ago. Requested reassignment to conventional forces. Wanted to be just a medic. Wanted to keep a promise I'd made. What promise? Hayes asked gently. This was the hard part, the part that mattered. Sloan looked at her hands, saw the calluses, the scars, the evidence of a life lived on edges. My father died 5 years ago, Afghanistan. His team was running a classified operation near the Pakistan border, intelligence gathering. Something went wrong. IED got their convoy, killed 3 SEALs instantly. Dad survived long enough to call for help, but... She stopped, breathed, continued. He didn't make it to extraction. Bled out before the helicopters arrived. The office was completely silent. Even the fan seemed to quiet. I was in Syria when it happened. Deep cover. Couldn't come home. Couldn't go to the funeral. By the time I got leave 6 weeks later, he'd been in the ground at Arlington for over a month. Her voice stayed level, controlled. She wouldn't let it break. My mother was destroyed, completely broken. She'd lost her husband. Thought she was going to lose her daughter too the way I was living. The risks I was taking. So she made you promise, Brennan said. She begged me. Got down on her knees at his grave and begged me. No more combat, no more rifles, no more killing, just medicine, just saving lives. Be safe, come home, don't make her bury me too. And you agreed. I agreed, meant it, really meant it. I was done with that life. Done with the CIA. Done with rifles and classified missions and everything that had taken my father from us. Sloan looked up. But last night I broke that promise. Picked up a rifle and killed a man. Because if I hadn't, Commander Brennan would be dead. Brennan's face had gone pale again. So now I have to live with that, Sloan said quietly. Have to call my mother eventually and tell her I broke my word. Have to look at myself in the mirror and figure out who I am. A healer who kills when necessary. A killer who heals to balance the scales, both neither. Nobody had an answer for that. It was the eternal question of warriors who carried medicine in one hand and weapons in the other. Finally, Hayes spoke. Your father, the Reaper. When he pulled Commander Brennan from training, did he ever tell you why? What his reasoning was? Yeah, I asked him once, years later. Sloan looked at Brennan. He said Brennan's a good man, solid, brave, but he's not a killer. And SEALs have to be both. It has to be in your DNA, natural. If it's not, you hesitate. And hesitation in combat gets people killed. Brennan would hesitate, so I pulled him before he got himself or someone else killed. Brennan closed his eyes. He was right. I would have hesitated. Hell, I did hesitate last night. Didn't even see the sniper until you yelled. In the time it took me to process the threat, I'd have been dead. But you're alive, sir. That's what matters. Because you didn't hesitate. You saw the threat, made the decision, and executed. All in the time it took me to blink. Brennan opened his eyes. You're your father's daughter. No question about that. Sloan didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. Beckett cleared his throat. So what happens now? Sir Doc just saved your life, and probably the mission. What's the call? Brennan stood, walked to the small window, looked out at the desert base, the Marines training, the machinery of war. We have a problem, he said finally. He pulled a folder from his desk, dropped it in front of Sloan. This is Viktor Volkov, former Russian Spetsnaz, expert marksman. For the last 6 months, he's been operating in this region as a freelance sniper. Highest bidder. No loyalty except to money. Sloan opened the folder, saw a face, cold eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. 7 confirmed kills, Brennan continued. All coalition forces, all single shots at extreme range. British patrol 3 weeks ago, officer killed at 1,100 meters. French position 2 weeks before that, sniper killed at 980 meters. He's good, patient, professional, and he doesn't make mistakes. Hayes picked up one of the photos. Crime scene image. The guy last night wasn't him. No, that was just a local fighter who got lucky with a rifle. But Volkov is out here. Intel says he's been hired by the same ISIS cell that took our hostages. They're paying him to eliminate high-value targets. Officers, senior NCOs, anyone who might lead a rescue operation. They're expecting us to come back, Sloan said. Yes, and they're expecting Volkov to kill whoever leads the assault. Brennan looked at each of them in turn. The hostages, Sullivan and Chen, are still alive, still in that compound. We have 48 hours before they're moved to a secondary location we can't track, which means we have 48 hours to plan and execute a rescue. Against a professional counter-sniper who'll be waiting for us, Hayes said flatly. Exactly. Beckett whistled low. That's a suicide mission, sir. Maybe, unless we have our own sniper, someone who can counter Volkov, keep him off our assault team long enough to extract the hostages and get clear. All 3 men looked at Sloan. She felt the weight of their expectations, felt the choice being laid in front of her, felt the ghost of her father's voice in her memory and her mother's tears in her heart. Sir, she said carefully, I'm a corpsman. My primary duty is medical support. Your primary duty is to keep Marines alive, Brennan corrected. Sometimes that means bandages. Sometimes that means bullets. And right now, we need bullets delivered with extreme precision. He paused. Let that sink in. I'm not ordering you to do this, Remington. Can't order it. It's not in your job description. But I'm asking, as the man whose life you saved last night, will you help us? The question hung between them like smoke. Heavy, inescapable. Sloan thought about her mother, about the promise, about the phone call she'd have to make. She thought about her father, about Montana and rifle ranges, and a voice saying, precision saves lives, sweetheart. However you choose to use it. She thought about 2 hostages, James Sullivan and Robert Chen, sitting in that compound waiting to live or die based on choices other people made. She thought about Marines who'd have to assault that compound under Volkov's crosshairs if she said no. I'll need to know everything about Volkov, she said. Range capabilities, preferred positions, kill patterns, equipment specifications if we have them. Brennan smiled, thin, tired, but genuine. We have it all. Hayes briefed her. Hayes pulled more photos from the folder, spread them on the desk like tarot cards predicting futures. Viktor Volkov, age 42, Spetsnaz service from 1998 to 2015. Multiple combat deployments, Chechnya, Georgia, Ukraine, Syria. Confirmed kills in official records, 23. Actual number estimated at over 50. Preferred weapon, Orsis T5000 and .3, 3 years 8 Lapua Magnum. Effective range in his hands out to 1,500 meters, maybe further. Sloan studied the photos. Each one showed the same pattern. Single entry wound, long range, no warning, clinical, professional. The work of someone who'd turned killing into an art form. He's patient, she observed, sets up early, waits for the perfect shot, doesn't rush, doesn't take unnecessary risks. Correct. Hayes pointed to another photo. British patrol 3 weeks ago. The officer was killed at exactly 1,100 meters. Based on thermal imaging and site analysis, Volkov was in position for at least 8 hours before taking the shot. Just waiting. Perfectly still. Perfectly patient. Where does he like to set up? High ground when available, but not always the highest point. He picks positions with good cover, good concealment, and multiple escape routes. He's not suicidal, takes the shot and disappears like a ghost. We've never even come close to catching him. Sloan processed this information, built a mental profile, thought about angles and approaches and the mathematics of mutual destruction. What about the hostage compound terrain analysis? Brennan unrolled a topographic map, spread it across the desk. Mostly flat desert, scrub brush, some rocky outcrops. But here, he pointed, northeast side, ridgeline 800 meters out. Good elevation, clear sight lines to the compound and all approach routes. That's where he'll be, Sloan said with complete certainty. Or somewhere very close. He'll want to cover the most likely assault vectors. Agreed, we didn't. Which means you need to be somewhere else. Somewhere unexpected. Sloan traced the map with one finger, calculating, thinking like a sniper, like her father had taught her. Here, southwest side. This wadi, lower elevation than his position, but if I'm prone in the depression, I can see his likely hide sites. And he won't be looking that direction because it's not a natural sniper position. It's too low, too exposed, which makes it perfect. Range to his probable position, Hayes asked. Sloan measured carefully with her fingers against the map scale. Approximately 1,200 meters, maybe 1,250 depending on exactly where he sets up. Beckett shook his head. Doc, that's one hell of a long shot, especially if he's dug in and camouflaged. I know, Sergeant, but it's doable, with the right rifle and the right conditions. We have an M24, Brennan said. Army sniper weapon system. Remington 700 action, 7.62 NATO. Should be effective out to 1,200 meters in the right hands. Are your hands the right ones, Doc? Hayes asked quietly. Sloan met his gray eyes, saw the question beneath the question, saw him asking if she could really do this. If she could go up against a professional killer with 50-plus kills and come out alive. Yes, Chief, they are. No hesitation, no doubt. Her father's daughter. Brennan nodded once. All right, mission planning starts now. We hit the compound tomorrow night. Gives us 1 day to prepare. Sloan, you'll insert 6 hours before the assault team. Get into position while there's still daylight. Camouflage. Hide. Wait. When we begin the assault at 0200 hours, your job is to find Volkov and neutralize him. You don't have to kill him, just keep him from killing us. And if suppression doesn't work, Hayes asked. Sloan's voice was steady, calm, final. Then I kill him, Chief. Just like that. Just like that. The briefing broke up after another hour of detailed planning. Assault routes, timelines, contingencies, the complex choreography of violence that was modern military operations. Sloan returned to her tent, sat on her cot, pulled out the photograph again, her father, her mother, herself at 16 with a rifle. 3 people frozen in a moment of happiness before everything changed. She traced her father's face with one finger. Wished she could ask him what to do. Wished she could hear his voice one more time. But the dead didn't speak, and the living had to make their own choices. Her phone buzzed. Text message from her mother. I'm sorry I got upset. I love you. Be safe. Please. Sloan typed back, love you too, Mom. I promise I'll be careful. She hit send. Then she lay back on the cot and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd walk into the desert with a rifle and the intention to kill a man she'd never met. A professional, someone who was probably better than her. But she had one advantage Volkov didn't have. She'd been taught by a ghost, by a legend, by a man who'd made precision an art form and passed that art to his daughter. And tomorrow that art would save lives. Or end them. One way or another, the desert would have its answer. The sun was dying on the western horizon when Sloan began her walk into emptiness. Alone, the way it had to be. the way snipers always operated when the mission mattered most. She carried 60 pounds of gear, the M24 rifle strapped across her back, but not the standard issue M24 from the armory. This one was different, special. Chief Hayes had found it that morning in the equipment storage facility, wrapped in a weatherproof case that had been sitting untouched for 5 years. A case with a name stenciled on the side in faded letters, GSGT, Garrett Remington SEAL Team 3, her father's rifle, the one he'd carried on his last deployment, the one that had been shipped home with his personal effects and stored away because no one knew what else to do with it. Remington 700 with a custom stock and a match-grade barrel, and on the wooden forestock carved in letters so small you had to look close, Little Reaper. His nickname for her, from the Montana weekends, from the daughter who could shoot like her father's shadow. Hayes had handed it to her without a word, just placed it in her hands and stepped back. Let her feel the weight of it. Let her understand what it meant. He'd want you to have it, Hayes had said quietly. Now she walked into the Syrian desert carrying her father's legacy and the weight of everything it represented. 3 kilometers northeast to the wadi she'd marked on the map. The depression in the earth that would hide her from Volkov's sight while giving her angles on his probable positions. The desert was rust and bone, wind-carved patterns in the sand like the fingerprints of God. Nothing grew here except thorn scrub and the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat too loud in your ears. Sloan moved with deliberate care. No straight lines, no patterns that might catch a trained eye. Just the irregular drift of something that belonged to this landscape. She'd learned that in Syria during her 3 years with the CIA, how to become part of the terrain, how to disappear into geography and geology until you were just another rock or shadow or trick of the light. It took 2 hours to cover 3 kilometers. When she reached the wadi, the sun was touching the horizon. Perfect timing. She had maybe 20 minutes of usable light to prepare her position before full darkness came. She scraped out a shallow depression in the sand at the bottom of the wadi, laid down a thermal blanket to mask her heat signature from any infrared detection, arranged rocks and scrub brush to break up her outline, built a hide that looked like nothing, like wind and erosion and the random chaos of desert formation. By the time she finished, you could walk within 10 feet and not see her, could look directly at her position, and your eyes would slide past without registering anything human. Sloan settled into position, prone, rifle on its bipod, eye to the scope. She ranged the distance to Volkov's probable positions. The ridgeline 800 meters northeast where Brennan had predicted he'd set up, 1,240 meters from her current hide. Long shot, very long shot, at the ragged edge of the M24's effective range, but doable, if she was perfect. If the wind cooperated, if her father's training held true across 8 years of rust and broken promises. Night fell like a curtain dropping. Temperature plummeted from 90 degrees to 50 in 2 hours. Sloan had a thermal layer in her pack but didn't put it on yet. Couldn't afford to get comfortable. Comfort made you soft, made your reflexes slow, made you dead. She lay in the sand and watched stars wheel overhead. Orion, Cassiopeia, Ursa Major. The same constellations her father had taught her to navigate by when she was 12 years old. Before GPS, before modern technology. Just a girl and her father and the ancient art of finding your way by light that had left its source millions of years before humans existed. Somewhere out there in the darkness, Viktor Volkov was doing the same thing. Preparing, waiting. A professional killer with 50-plus confirmed kills and the patience of stone. Sloan checked her rifle for the 100th time. Bolt smooth, chamber clean, scope crystal clear, magazine loaded with 5 rounds of match-grade 7.62 millimeter ammunition. 5 chances to end this. 5 opportunities to save the assault team and the hostages and herself. Her radio clicked once, Hayes checking in from the base. She clicked back. All good, all quiet. The night deepened. Sloan's breathing slowed into the meditative rhythm her father had taught her. In for 4 counts. Hold for 7. Out for 8. The pattern that lowered heart rate and steadied nerves and prepared the body for the moment when everything would depend on absolute calm. This was the hardest part of sniping. Not the shooting, the waiting, the hours of absolute stillness while your mind tried to betray you with doubt and fear, and the 1,000 ways this could go catastrophically wrong. She thought about her father, wondered if he'd ever lain in a position like this, waiting for dawn and the possibility of death. Probably. SEALs spent half their operational lives waiting in uncomfortable places for moments that would be over in seconds. She thought about her mother, about the phone call 2 days ago, about the broken promise and the tears in her mother's voice, about forgiveness that might come eventually, but wouldn't erase the hurt. She thought about Viktor Volkov, about a man she'd never met who she was going to try to kill in a few hours. Did he have a family, a daughter somewhere who thought he was a hero? A story that made sense from his perspective. It didn't matter. He'd chosen his path. She'd chosen hers. Tomorrow, they'd meet in the cold mathematics of trajectory and wind drift, and one of them wouldn't go home. Sloane closed her eyes, slept in controlled 30-minute intervals, a trick her father had taught her for long operations. Never full sleep, just enough to rest the brain without losing alertness. Stay ready. Stay sharp. Dawn came slowly, gray light bleeding into the eastern sky. Then pink. Then the first spear of gold over the horizon. Sloane's radio clicked 3 times. Assault team moving, ETA to compound 45 minutes. She settled deeper into her hide, began scanning the ridgeline through her scope, looking for the thing that didn't belong, the shadow that was too regular, the reflection that caught light wrong, the tiny detail that would betray a human presence in a landscape of stone and sand. Nothing yet, but Volkov was there. Had to be. Too perfect a position. Too obvious for a man who hunted coalition forces for money. 30 minutes to assault. The light improved with every passing second. Sloane could see individual rocks now, could distinguish different shades of sand, could make out the details that had been invisible in darkness. 20 minutes. Movement on the ridgeline. Small, brief. Could have been wind moving vegetation. Could have been an animal. Could have been a Russian sniper settling into his final firing position. Sloane's pulse stayed at 58 beats per minute. Resting rate. She breathed in for 4 seconds. Held for 7. Out for 8. The rhythm so ingrained it happened automatically even as her conscious mind processed what she was seeing. 15 minutes. There, a glint of light. Scope glass catching the sun for just an instant. 800 meters northeast. Exactly where Brennan had predicted. Sloane adjusted her aim point. 1,240 meters to target. She clicked elevation on her scope. Up, 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 compensating for the massive bullet drop at that range. A septitice. 62 millimeters round would fall nearly 90 inches over 1,200 meters. Like throwing a baseball over a 3-story building and expecting to hit a target on the other side. Wind from the east. 6 miles per hour. Steady for now. She clicked windage adjustments. Left. Compensating for drift. At 1,200 meters, even a gentle breeze could push a bullet 2 feet off target. The assault team was 5 minutes out now. Sloane could hear the distant rumble of Humvees approaching. The mechanical sound of Americans coming to war. Volkov would hear it too. Would be settling behind his rifle right now, picking his target through his scope. Probably Commander Brennan. Officers first. That's how you broke an assault. Kill the leader and watch the unit fall apart. Sloane found him in her scope. Or found where he had to be. The hide was professional, expert-level camouflage. She could see the barrel of his rifle extending from the position. Ursus T-5000, long and dark against pale stone, could see his scope, but not the man himself. 4 minutes. The Humvees were visible now, dust trails rising against the morning sky. Volkov's rifle moved fractionally. Tracking, finding his target. Sloane breathed. In, hold, out. Put her crosshairs on the visible part of his position, center mass of where a human body would have to be to operate that rifle. If she could hit the weapon itself, she could disable it. Mission accomplished without killing. Without adding, another goes to the collection that haunted her sleep. 3 minutes. Sloane's finger touched the trigger. 2 pounds of pressure applied, halfway to the 4-pound breakpoint where the rifle would fire. 2 minutes. The assault team was deploying now. Marines exiting vehicles in tactical formation, moving toward the compound with professional precision. Beautiful in its coordination, deadly in its intent. Volkov's rifle steadied. He'd found his shot. 1 minute. Sloane squeezed, smooth as silk, gentle as a prayer, the way her father had taught her 1,000 times on the Montana range. The M24 roared. Recoil punched her shoulder. The scope lost the target in the violent jump of firing. She cycled the bolt, fast, mechanical, ejected the spent brass and chambered a fresh round. Found the target again in her scope. Miss. Her round had impacted 10 feet from Volkov's position. Close enough to spray him with rock fragments and warn him someone was shooting back. Not close enough to matter. His rifle swung toward her. Fast, professional. He'd tracked her muzzle flash through his scope, had found her position in the time it took her to cycle the bolt. Sloane's mind went ice cold. Pure calculation. No fear. No time for fear. She'd misjudged the wind. It wasn't 6 miles per hour, it was 9, maybe 10. The correction came automatically. Years of training asserting itself. Volkov's scope was a black circle pointed directly at her position, pointed at her soul. She clicked windage. Left. More. Breathed. Squeezed. The world exploded. Not her rifle. His. Volkov had fired first. Had acquired her. Had sent a .338 Lapua Magnum round screaming across 1,200 meters at 2,800 feet per second. Sloane felt the impact before she heard the sound. Her left shoulder. Massive punch like being hit with a baseball bat swung by a giant. The M24 fell from her grip. She rolled instinctively. Got off the X, moved or died. The fundamental truth of being shot at. Pain came in waves after the initial impact. White-hot agony radiating from shoulder to fingertips to the base of her skull. Through and through wound, she could tell without looking. Entry wound front, exit wound back. The distinctive burn of a bullet passing completely through flesh. Her right hand found her medical pack. Muscle memory, training overriding pain. She pulled out hemostatic gauze. No tourniquet for this. Tourniquets were for limbs. This needed packing. She shoved gauze into the entry wound with her right hand. Bit down on a scream that tried to escape. Packed it tight. Pushed it deep. The exit wound was worse. Bigger. Ragged. The bullet had tumbled on its way through. More gauze. More pressure. More pain that tried to gray out her vision. Her hand found a morphine injector. 5 milligrams, not the full 10. Needed to stay functional. Needed to fight. Jammed it into her thigh through her fatigues. The pain receded to manageable levels. Not gone. Never gone. But controlled enough to think. To move. To act. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire erupted. The assault team had engaged. They were moving on the compound now. Volkov would be tracking them, looking for his next kill. She had to move. Had to get back in the fight. Sloane reached for the M24 with her right hand. Left arm was useless. Hanging limp. Maybe the bone was intact. Maybe not. Didn't matter right now. Getting into prone position one-handed was impossible. Physics and anatomy made it impossible. She'd have to shoot from a modified stance. Sitting. Braced against a rock. Using the stone as a rest for the rifle. The world tilted sickeningly. Blood loss. Shock. The morphine making everything soft at the edges. She fought for focus. Found it through sheer will. Through the scope, she could see Volkov. He'd shifted position slightly, was tracking the assault team through his optic, his rifle swinging slowly as he searched for the perfect shot. 1,240 meters. Sloane was wounded, significant blood loss. Morphine affecting her reaction time, shooting one-handed from an unstable platform. Impossible shot. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, clear as if he was standing beside her. There's no such thing as impossible, sweetheart. Only difficult. And difficult is what we train for. Difficult is where we live. She wedged the rifle against the rock. Right hand on the grip, left arm useless at her side. Cheek to stock, eye to scope. Breathed in, hold out. Found Volkov in the reticle. He was more exposed now. Had gotten confident after hitting her. Thought she was done. Thought he'd eliminated the threat. Mistake. Sloane calculated. Wind, distance. Her own compromised condition. Blood loss affecting her vision. Morphine slowing her processing speed by maybe 3%. The unstable shooting position adding variables she couldn't fully control. She compensated for all of it. Clicked elevation. Windage. Found the center point between what her brain knew and what her body could deliver. The assault team was breaching the compound now. 30 seconds until they were fully exposed. 30 seconds until Volkov would kill someone. 20 seconds. Sloane's heartbeat was 65. Elevated from stress and injury and blood loss. She waited for the space between beats. Found it. 15 seconds. Volkov's finger tightened on his trigger. She could see it through the scope. See the tension in his body. The commitment to the shot. 10 seconds. Sloane squeezed her trigger. The M24 bucked against her injured shoulder. Pain exploded through her entire left side. White and blinding and trying to drag her into unconsciousness. She fought it. Stayed conscious through will alone. Stayed aware long enough to see through the scope. Watched the bullet fly. Could almost see it. 1.8 seconds of flight time. 1,240 meters of empty air and wind and the universe's tendency toward chaos. The bullet dropped in its arc. Carried on the wind. Fought gravity every inch of the way. Found Viktor Volkov. Center mass. through the chest. Exactly where she'd aimed despite the wound and the morphine and the impossible distance. He fell, dropped his rifle, tried to crawl but couldn't, went still, dead or dying. Either way, no longer a threat. The assault team breached the compound. Sloan could hear it over the radio through the fog of pain and medication. Hostiles down, hostages secured, Sullivan and Cheyenne alive and unharmed, all Marines accounted for, mission complete. She let the rifle fall, sat back against the rock. Her left shoulder was on fire despite the morphine. Blood had soaked through the packing. She'd need a medevac soon. Needed a hospital. Needed surgery and recovery time measured in weeks. But they'd done it. The hostages were safe. The Marines were alive. Volkov was dead. Precision had saved lives. Just like her father always said it would. Sloan keyed her radio with her right hand, voice weak but clear. Hayes, mission complete. Volkov is down. Confirmed kill. I'm hit, shoulder. Need extraction. Static, then Hayes' voice tight with concern. Copy Doc. Medevac inbound. ETA 15 minutes. Stay with us. Not planning to go anywhere, Chief. She wasn't going to die here. Refused to. Her mother had lost her father. Wasn't going to lose her daughter, too. Sloan pulled out another pressure bandage, one-handed. Awkward, difficult, but she managed. Got it over the wound, applied pressure with her right hand, squeezed, held. The helicopter came 18 minutes later. Black Hawk, the most beautiful sound in the world. Rotors beating salvation into the desert air. Beckett was first out, ran to her position, saw the blood, saw her face. His expression went hard with controlled emotion. Jesus, Doc, you're shot. Notice that sergeant. Volkov, she pointed northeast with her chin, toward the ridgeline. Dead, 1,240 meters, one shot. While you were wounded, had to be done. Beckett started a proper IV line. His hands were gentle despite their size. You did more than good, Doc. You did impossible. Saved a lot of lives today. Just the job, Sergeant. No, it's more than that. He looked at her with something like awe. You're the real deal, Doc, just like your old man. Hayes arrived, took one look at Sloan and his weathered face went pale. How bad? Through and through. Missed bone, I think. Lost blood. Stable, though. Her voice was getting distant. Blood loss and morphine dragging her down. Might pass out soon. Don't. Stay with us, Doc. Trying Chief. They loaded her onto a stretcher. Into the helicopter. Sloan watched the desert fall away beneath her. Watched the compound grow small. Watched the ridgeline where Volkov had died become just another feature in an endless landscape. One sniper. One battlefield. She'd won. But victory tasted like copper and felt like drowning in slow motion. The hospital was morphine dreams and white light. Surgery, recovery, voices saying lucky and close call and full recovery expected. Sloan drifted in and out. Sometimes she was in Montana, sometimes Syria, sometimes a nowhere place where her father's voice spoke wisdom she couldn't quite remember when she woke. She came fully conscious 3 days later. Field hospital bed, left arm immobilized, shoulder bandaged, IV in her right arm, and sitting in a chair beside the bed, Commander Brennan. Welcome back, Remington. Her throat was dry. Brennan handed her water. She sipped carefully, tasted like salvation. How long? 3 days. Surgery went well. Clean through and through. Missed everything important. You'll make a full recovery. He paused. Volkov is confirmed K1A. Assault team found him on that ridgeline. Your shot hit him exactly where you aimed. 1,240 meters while wounded. Most impressive piece of marksmanship I've ever witnessed. Just lucky, sir. Don't. Brennan's voice was sharp. Don't diminish it. What you did was extraordinary. You saved the assault team, saved the hostages, saved me for the second time. That deserves recognition. Sloan didn't know how to respond to that. Brennan pulled an envelope from his jacket. This was in your father's personal effects, the ones the Army sent back from Afghanistan. I had them forwarded from storage. Thought you should have it. The envelope was standard military issue, sealed. Her name on the front in her father's handwriting, Sloan. Thank you, sir. Brennan stood. I'm putting you in for a Navy Cross. Hayes and Beckett are supporting it. What you did deserves the highest recognition. Sir, I'd prefer you didn't. Attention means questions. Questions mean examining my past. I'd rather stay quiet, stay out of the spotlight. Brennan studied her for a long moment. All right, unit citation instead. Spreads the credit around. Keeps you anonymous. Fair enough. Yes, sir, thank you. After he left, Sloan sat alone with the envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, 2 pages in her father's precise handwriting, dated 3 weeks before he died in Afghanistan. She read, Sloan, if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. I'm sorry for that. Sorry I won't see you grow old. Won't meet your family if you have one. Won't be there for all the moments that matter. But I'm not sorry for what I taught you. The shooting. The tactics. The hard skills of a hard trade. I taught you those things because I saw the gift in you. The steadiness. The precision. The ability to make the difficult choice and live with it afterward. Your mother will want you to walk away from all of it. She'll beg you to be safe, to be normal. And maybe you will. Maybe you should. God knows this life isn't easy. But if you can't walk away, if it calls you back, then know this, there's no shame in being what you are. A healer and a fighter, both hands remember. We talked about this. Medicine and marksmanship come from the same place. The desire to make things right, to fix what's broken. Sometimes you fix it with sutures and antibiotics. Sometimes you fix it with a precisely placed bullet. The intent is what matters. I taught you to shoot, not because I wanted you to kill, but because I wanted you to have options, to be capable, to protect yourself and others when protection was needed. Use that training wisely. Use it rarely, but use it without hesitation when the moment demands it. I'm proud of you, Sloan. Proud of who you are. Proud of who you'll become. Proud of the lives you'll save, however you choose to save them. And if the day comes when you have to break a promise to do what's right, then break it. Promises to the dead matter less than lives of the living. Do what needs doing. I'll understand. Be well, sweetheart. Be strong. Be yourself. Love, Dad. P.S. Aim small. Miss small. And remember, precision saves lives, always. Sloan read it 3 times. By the 3rd reading, tears were streaming down her face. Silent. Steady. The release of 5 years of grief and guilt and the crushing weight of being her father's daughter. He'd known. Had known she'd struggle. Had given her permission to be what she needed to be. She folded the letter carefully, held it against her chest. Let herself cry for the first time since his funeral. 6 months later, Sloan stood at the front of a classroom at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia. 24 students sat before her. 12 combat medics, 12 designated marksmen, years ranging from 22 to 38. All volunteers for the pilot program that would change how the military thought about combat specialties. Integrated combat medicine, the concept that had been approved 3 months after her shoulder healed. The program that said a person could carry life in both hands, could heal and fight, could be complete instead of specialized. Good morning, I'm Corman Remington. She looked at their faces, saw skepticism, curiosity, the beginning of respect. For the next 8 weeks, I'm going to teach you to think differently about your jobs. Medics, you'll learn basic marksmanship and tactical awareness. Shooters, you'll learn trauma medicine and emergency care. She paused. Let that sink in. Some of you are wondering why. You trained for one thing, committed to one specialty. Why learn another? A hand went up. Young Marine, fresh face. Ma'am, isn't it better to be really good at one thing than mediocre at 2? Excellent question, and the answer is no. Specialization is good, but integration is better, because combat doesn't respect your job description. The situation changes in seconds. The medic might need to shoot. The shooter might need to stop bleeding. If you can't do both, people die unnecessarily. She advanced the presentation, showed photos from Syria, from the mission where she'd faced Volkov. Redacted, anonymized, but real. This is a combat medic providing emergency care while under direct fire. Notice her weapon placement. Notice her situational awareness. Notice she's doing medicine while maintaining tactical readiness. Next slide. This is a designated marksman applying a tourniquet to his own leg wound after being shot. He stayed in position, took 3 more shots, eliminated the threat, then called for medevac. He lived because he knew medicine. The students leaned forward, starting to understand. In this course, you'll learn both. You'll learn to transition from healing to fighting and back again in seconds. You'll learn that violence and medicine aren't opposites. They're tools, and the best warriors know which tool to use when. She spent 8 weeks teaching them, range time in medical labs, scenarios that forced them to make choices, to switch roles, to think beyond their specialties. Some struggled, the medics who couldn't reconcile shooting with healing, the shooters who got squeamish around blood. But most adapted, most grew, most became something more than they'd been. On graduation day, Brennan showed up, and Hayes, and Beckett, the men who'd been there, who'd seen integration work when everything was on the line. They watched Sloan present certificates to 24 students who'd completed the hardest course of their careers. Afterward, Brennan pulled her aside. Marine Corps wants to expand this program, 6 more locations, hundreds of students over the next year. That's good, sir. Army's interested too, Air Force. This might become Doctrine Remington. Standard training across all branches. Sloan thought about that, about her father's legacy, about precision saving lives in multiple directions, about both hands. That's what it should be, sir. Not special, just standard, just the smart way to train warriors. You've changed things, Doc, really changed them. We changed them, sir. All of us. 3 months into the expanded program, Sloan's mother called. Honey, I want to visit, want to see what you're doing. It was the first time she'd asked, the first real step toward understanding. I'd like that, Mom. Her mother came the following week, stood in the back of the classroom. Watched Sloan teach 24 students how to save lives with medicine and marksmanship. Watch them learn to be complete instead of limited. Afterward, they sat in the cafeteria, coffee between them. 5 years of hurt and healing, trying to find equilibrium. Your father would have loved this, her mother said quietly, seeing you teach, seeing his methods validated, seeing his legacy continue. I hope so, Mom. I know so. Her mother reached across the table, took Sloan's hand. I'm sorry I made you promise. Sorry I tried to make you less than what you are. Mom, you were protecting me, protecting yourself, I understand. I was protecting myself from loss, but in doing that I was trying to diminish you, make you smaller, safer. Tears in her eyes. But you're not small, you're not safe. You're your father's daughter in all the ways that matter. I'm trying to be both of yours, Mom, his strength, your compassion, both hands. Her mother smiled through tears. You are honey, you really are. It wasn't complete healing, but it was progress. Sometimes progress was enough. By the end of 2025, integrated combat medicine was in 12 states. Funding from the VA, support from all service branches. The phrase both hands became military shorthand for the philosophy. Warriors who could heal and fight. 3 years after that, 2028, the doctrine became standard. Every combat medic received advanced tactical training. Every infantry soldier received advanced medical training. The lines blurred until they barely existed. Studies showed a 15% decrease in combat mortality rates. 15%, hundreds of lives per year, thousands over time. All because one corpsman picked up a rifle when she'd promised not to. All because precision could save lives in multiple directions. Sloan stood in Montana in the spring of 2028, 4 years after the mission where she'd faced Volkov and found herself. At her father's grave in the small cemetery outside town, the headstone was simple. Garrett Reaper Remington, SEAL Team 3, husband, father, hero. She placed fresh flowers, knelt in the grass. The wind carried the smell of pine and earth and the promise of mountain summer. Hi, Dad. Sorry it's been a while. The stone offered no reply, but she felt his presence anyway. Always did here. The program's going well. We've trained over 2,000 students now. The Marines are calling it the Remington method. I told them to stop, but you know how the military is. Once they name something, it sticks. She smiled. Mom's doing better. We talk every week now. She came to Quantico, saw what we're doing. I think she finally understands why I couldn't walk away. Why I had to be both things, healer and warrior. Your daughter and hers. A bird called from the trees. Sloan looked up, watched it circle in thermals. I got new orders yesterday. Deployment, back to the Middle East. Teaching the program to coalition forces. 6-month rotation. She paused. I'm taking your rifle, the one you left me. Feels right having it there. Having you there with me. The wind picked up, rustled the flowers she'd placed. I broke my promise, Dad. The one I made to Mom. I picked up a rifle, killed people, became what I swore I wouldn't be. Her voice caught. But I also saved people. More than I killed. More than I could have if I'd stayed just a medic. Just safe. She stood, placed her hand on the stone, warm from spring sun. You were right about everything. About precision, about both hands, about being complete instead of limited. I'm living that truth now, teaching it, threading it. Your legacy continues. A truck pulled up at the cemetery entrance. Her mother, come to join her. I miss you, Dad, every single day, but I'm doing the work, living the life you prepared me for. making the hard choices, saving the lives that can be saved. She stepped back. And I'm not ashamed anymore. Not of what I am, not of what you taught me. Both hands remember you said it would matter. You were right. Her mother walked up, stood beside her. They looked at the stone together. He would be so proud, her mother said softly. I know, Mom. Are you happy, Sloan? Really happy doing this? Sloan thought about that, about the classroom. The students, the lives saved by warriors who could heal and healers who could fight. About purpose and meaning and work that mattered. Yes, she said honestly, I am. Her mother took her hand, squeezed. They stood together in silence, mother and daughter, widow and orphan, both learning to honor the man they'd lost by living fully instead of safely. The sun climbed higher. Sloan would leave tomorrow for Quantico, then overseas, then wherever the mission took her. But tonight she was home, under Montana sky, in the place where her father had taught her to shoot and to live, and to understand that some gifts came with weight, but also with purpose. She stood on the porch of the ranch house that evening, looked at the stars emerging in the darkening sky, the same stars she'd watched from Syrian desert, the same constellations her father had taught her. Somewhere out there, someone was learning the Remington method, learning to carry life in both hands, learning that precision saved lives, whether delivered through a needle or a rifle scope. The legacy continued, spreading, growing, changing how warriors thought about their purpose. Sloan smiled, went inside. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and she'd be ready. Both hands, always both hands. The way her father had taught her, the way she was teaching others, the way forward. Precision saves lives. Her father had been right about that, about everything.